Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Welcome to the 1 Peter 5 podcast, Rebuilding Christendom, Restoring Catholic Culture and Tradition. I'm Timothy Flanders, editor-in-chief of 1 Peter 5. Today we're talking about our next phase of our crusade. 1 Peter 5 came under new ownership last fall, and it was just at the time when Traditionis Custodes came out in July. And at that time, we released a new editorial stance, which was an attempt to find our place within the traditional movement, to help the whole traditional movement by promoting Unite the Clans and the restoration of the spirit of our forefathers in the traditional movement. The spirit of our forefathers, which fought for the ancient Roman Rite at a time when they were abandoned by even most of the hierarchy. Even today, we still have a few bishops who support us, but the situation was a lot more bleak in 1964 when Una Voce, for example, was founded. And so what we saw as our role at 1 Peter 5 was to try to inspire and pass down this spirit of our forefathers, the fight, the crusading spirit of our forefathers, to pass down this ancient rite, to pass it down to us in a time when the Pope has once again decreed against this ancient Roman rite. And this has become something more as we came into the new year and as we started promoting the Crusade of Eucharistic Reparation. And this was started by His Excellency Bishop Schneider in 2020, back when the sacrileges were increasing during the COVID crisis. And this really I became realizing that it was really the soul of the trad movement, really going back to the 1964, was this desire to give God the greatest glory, that he in the Blessed Sacrament should receive the greatest glory and the greatest worship. And that this iconoclasm, this destruction of the liturgy, is a destruction of the worship of God, is a destruction of the faith of little children, a faith in the dogma of the real presence. So this crusade is a very old crusade. It's decades old, and it's something that we hope to do at 1 Peter 5 by your prayers, by the prayers of our patrons, is to really inspire that continued spirit of the fight as the younger generation of traditionalists, we grow up and we continue to pass down this faith, this ancient rite. And so today we're talking about the next phase of this crusade. We've been writing about this since last fall. And I wanted to just talk about this and answer any questions anybody had, just to talk about how this all works and make sure it's all clear to everybody. But first, quickly, I wanted to mention one aspect of that Eucharistic reparation is actually a part of the message of Fatima. And we've talked a lot about the conversion of Russia, the consecration of Russia last month before that, especially with March, with the alleged consecration by Pope Francis. But Eucharistic reparation is actually one of the central messages of Fatima, which began with the Angel of Portugal. And so we see this as a part of the message of Fatima that we can promote as a part of the traditional movement, and which also forms that core of the movement. So here we are. This is the month of Mary and the month of Fatima. And so we ask you to pray for this intention, that this crusade may continue to grow in strength, that we may convert more people to this cause. But in the next phase of this crusade, we have to talk about some brass tacks, and that is the issue of funds. This is something that many crusades have dealt with and have suffered for. But I just wanted to answer questions and talk about how this all works, because everyone should know that 1 Peter 5 was acquired by Crisis Publications. And when an acquisition like that happens, we can share a lot of resources for the operating costs of this online journal. And the idea was to transfer it and share costs and get it running again under new management, with a new editorial board, new direction. And we've done all that. That's what we've been producing over the past 6 months. And now we need 1 Peter 5 to continue to stay crowd-funded. This is something that we need because 1 Peter 5 cannot survive unless it is crowdfunded. We just don't have enough money for that. We need to have the funds so that we can pay all our costs. We can pay our writers, workers, everyone who's involved in 1 Peter 5. And with God's help, we can even expand this crusade to more avenues. Now, one of the, I was thinking about, the idea of an online journal. A lot of the traditional movement has traditionally, over the past 50 years, has been very much print focused, and that is there's a lot of advantages to print, of course. Newspapers, journals. One of the earlier journals was Triumph. The Remnant began in 1967. Before that, it was the Wanderer. Later, Catholic Family News, our friends over there. But with an online journal, we have certain advantages. One is that we can publish news very quickly. We can publish online content very quickly to respond to breaking news, things that are happening really right now, and everything's happening more. It seems to be going faster and faster as time goes on with Rome. Another advantage is that it has an outreach capability to non-Catholics or non-traditional Catholics. It's something that people can search. When people usually search, they go on Google or whatever, they search for traditional Catholic things, and 1 Peter 5 can pop up and we can give them the information that we need. And we can embed a lot of the video content in this online journal. Now, the other advantage, of course, is that it's free. No one has to pay anything to access all of the online content that we produce. And so it is free for anyone, but it's not free to produce. And that's the reason for this next phase of the crusade. We've tried to build this spiritual content focus, the soul of this online journal, the soul of reparation, the soul of reverence and pious love for the Blessed Sacrament, and the desire that God may receive greater glory. And the bottom line is that we need your support. We depend on these donations that 1 Peter 5 continue to be free and continue to provide this content for free. So that is the next phase of the crusade. Now, as I mentioned, we published an article a few weeks ago about the Fourth Crusade. That was a crusade that was a disaster, and it was because of lack of funds. And this is something that a crusade, as His Excellency Bishop Schneider called this crusade, which was, as I said, a continuation of really that soul of that crusade of our forefathers. And it is a spiritual, it is deeply spiritual. That is the fundamental aspect of it. But we have to enter into the temporal realities that we have, and that includes money. So that's the reason that we're appealing for this money. We want to continue to stay crowdfunded. We don't want to make anything not free. We want to continue to have a donor base. And so now the other thing is we don't like to ask for money all the time. We don't want to just be bombarding you, asking you for money every single month. We want to just do it twice a year. But in order to do that, we have to raise a lot more money in each fundraiser. So we want to just do a spring fundraiser and a December fundraiser. So right now, here's our spring fundraiser in the month of May, the month of Mary. And so we need to raise a total of $80,000 to cover up the transfer of 1 Peter 5 to under the management of Crisis Publications, and under the new management of the editorship and the editorial board and all the writers. And we have to raise that money for our spring fundraiser. So donations to 1 Peter 5 are tax deductible. You can get this content and you can make a donation that's tax deductible, as it is a nonprofit in the United States. So you can get that benefit as a part of your donation. So that is the next phase of our crusade. Our crusade cannot expand without this donor base. We do need your support. We depend on your support. So please chip into this spring fundraiser. So 1 Peter 5, as we state in our editorial stance, our goal is to unite the clans to rebuild Christendom. And the soul of this is the liturgy, but we've also begun to promote the post-liberal conversation, which is all talking about how do we truly rebuild Christendom, practically speaking? How do we build it in our communities? How do we build it in our families? How do we build it in with principles of politics, principles of economy? What are the different models that are out there that can work in different nations? We're seeking to expand also into European readership and beyond. So these things, however, are not possible without your support. So please make a tax-deductible donation to 1 Peter 5, 1peter5.com/donate. Phil says, hello from Denver. Love what you're doing. Change has definitely been for the better. You'll have my financial support. Thanks, Phil. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that very much. Corey's asking about 1 Peter 5. Corey, you can find out more about 1 Peter 5 if you go to our editorial stance. I'll send you the link right now, actually, here, Corey. But we aim to promote the traditional movement in the Roman Rite of the Catholic Church, which in particular has to do with restoring the Latin Mass to its full rights in the Roman Rite. If you'd like to read our editorial stance, that's I just put that in the link here. And we also want to situate and contextualize the traditional movement as it is modernly understood in the past 50, 60 years. We want to contextualize that within the wider Catholic counter-revolutionary movement, which really began at the onset of the French Revolution in particular, but even before that, at the late 18th century. But we see this with the Vendée Crusaders, who fought back against the French Revolution. We see this with the various counter-revolutionary figures, especially in the figures of the Ninth Crusaders, the so-called Ninth Crusaders, the Papal Zouaves. They were an international group of volunteer soldiers who were defending the Papal States in the 19th century against the Italian revolutionaries. And so we want to promote all of this. We want to restore greater knowledge about our forefathers who fought, bled, and died to pass down this faith, to pass down this ancient right to us. We now benefit from their sacrifice, and we want to honor that. And by honoring it, we want to restore and pass down the same spirit of the fight for truth with all charity. So that's what we want to do at 1 Peter 5. And so that's what we're asking you to support us in, to become a donor, donate for the spring fundraiser, which is going to be throughout this month. So I want to end by speaking a little bit about the spirituality of Paschaltide. This is something that we spend a lot of time as Catholics, especially of the Roman Rite, meditating on the Passion. And this is something that's very dear to me because I'm very much involved and inspired by the Passionist spirituality of St. Paul of the Cross. And so I in particular, I published something on Good Friday from St. Ignatius of the Sign of Jesus. But in Paschaltide, there's a particular spirituality of renewal and rebirth. There's a certain mystery of the glorious wounds of Christ. The glorious wounds of Christ, wherein Christ is risen from the dead, but he still has his wounds. And the Matins read, I believe it was St. Augustine, but in the Matins readings on Easter Monday and Tuesday, speak about how Christ communicates his glory through his wounds in his risen body. And so in Paschaltide, we take the disciplines of Lent and we enter into this deeper glory, this deeper contemplation of the sufferings and disciplines that we've tried to take on during Lent in reparation for our own sins and the sins of our brother. And we want to, by God's grace, enter into a transfigured union with Christ, a union with his mystical body, a union with his glorious sufferings. And this is the essence of Crusade. This is the essence of taking up the cross and of taking on us the sufferings that our forefathers gave us, and taking on us the sufferings that we have today. And by so doing, we participate in the passion of Christ. And by so doing, we enter into his resurrection and this new life of Paschaltide. This is the spirituality of Paschaltide. This is that mystery. This is one of the interesting things about Paschaltide is that the church reads the Gospel of St. John. And the Gospel of St. John is sort of the mystical gospel. The other three Gospels are have very they're so-called synoptic Gospels. But St. John is represented by the eagle because the Gospel of St. John is very mystical. It has a great deal of mystical meanings and symbolisms and all sorts of aspects to them. So this is actually passing down from the ancient catechumenate, when the catechumens would be initiated into the mystery at Easter Vigil, and then they would be entered into what's called the mystagogy, entering into this mystery, the greater contemplation of the mysteries of Christ within what's called the mysteries, the sacraments. In the Western Church, we call them the sacraments, but in the Greek term for sacraments is mystery. So we're entering into the mysteries, and the sacraments are the mysteries. And so there is this mystery of the glorious wounds of Christ. And this is what we contemplate in Paschaltide. And this is what allows us to have this contemplation, this merriment, this feasting without gluttony, is what this season is all about, is this new life in Christ, which is every year the catechumenate goes through this again. But as Catholics, even if we are fully initiated Catholics, we always enter into this same mystery once again, because we are fully initiated into the mystery. And every year we enter deeper by God's grace into this mystery. So this is the spirituality of Paschaltide. So I encourage you to, there's some great article we have at 1 Peter 5 about the customs of Paschaltide. There's some great customs. That's one of the central parts about rebuilding Christendom, is restoring customs in your family, just the oral traditions, everything that we pass down to our children. And to enter into this new life in Christ. Peter Kwasniewski had a great article on Easter Wednesday. You can take a look at that as well, about this same spirituality. So we enter into this, and we take on the crusade. And so we ask you to join to this crusade, that we may together participate in the glorious risen wounds of Christ. That, as we say in the Angelus prayer, that by his passion and cross we may be brought to the glory of his resurrection. And so that is the spirituality that is animating us at 1 Peter 5. And we need your help financially to be a part of this. So please donate at 1peter5.com/donate. Again, it's tax deductible. We need to raise the money this month, so we don't have to continue to ask you for money for the rest of the year. This spring fundraiser will help us get to December. So we hope that God will provide for us, so that we can continue to provide this for free for all. So thanks so much for watching. And thank you for support. I'm just going to offer up an Ave Maria with the icon of Our Lady of Fatima in Church Slavonic. This is the icon that we've been trying to promote as a part of the Fatima message. This is the Church Slavonic icon. And so we pray this Ave Maria for the conversion of Russia, the full conversion of our own hearts to a spirit of reparation in the spirit of Fatima, faithful to Our Lady, faithful to God in this crusade of our time. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Santa Maria Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed.